Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be reviewing some Big Finish. We're going to be looking at part 1 of Doctor Who, The Last Adventure, which is a limited edition set that was sent to me recently by one of my subscribers and patron, Unknown Don't Trust Numbers. This is the Big Finish story I've really been wanting to listen to for some time now, and I love this limited edition set. It's such a good decorative piece. I love it. And so this is basically 4 stories, 4 separate, but I believe loosely related stories. And I just listened to part 1, which is called The End of the Line, which is also a really good song. And I loved it. It's such a good story. Like, I really love this story. I've talked before on the channel about how sometimes I struggle with Big Finish, but there have been a few times where they've really blown me away. Like, I love Jubilee. I just absolutely love Jubilee. And I enjoyed Unit Dominion Part 1. But there have been stories I didn't click with, like Spare Parts. And that audio is a hard medium for me to connect with. But I really enjoyed The End of the Line, Part 1 of this. It was really, really good. It did a really good job of touching into things I liked. One, it does fear and horror, which I like. It does mystery, which I like. And it balances these genres well. And it has atmosphere. I've talked before about how atmosphere is important to me. It's one of the reasons why I love Ghostlight. It just has such a good atmosphere and tone to it. And I never have a problem picturing the events in my mind like I do with some Big Finish stories. The whole time I'm listening to it. Now, the very beginning, it took me a minute to figure out what was going on. I was very confused because it kind of starts right in the middle of stuff happening. And I'm sitting there going, well, I'm lost. This is going to be interesting, especially since human beings, we're very visually oriented. I think sight is kind of our predominant sense that we use. So it's harder when you're listening to something, when something's completely audio and it's having to tell a story. This story pulls it off beautifully. Again, it took a minute. I was very confused the first few minutes of this, trying to get everything sorted, what's going on. And I think that's done purposely. It has you off kilter from the beginning. I love the fact this takes place on a train and at a railway station. People are trying to get somewhere when everything just kind of shuts down and the lights go out and the train stops. I love horror stuff and scary stuff on a train. Something about a train just seems like a great setting for a scary story. I don't know why, but that really seems like it works for me. Maybe it's one of the reasons I liked Resident Evil 0, the game, because the beginning part takes place on a train. Because it is this small, excuse me, enclosed area. You know, very claustrophobic. Midnight does a really good job of tapping into that. You know, Midnight's not technically on a train, but it's in a similar situation with that small rover car. And it's boxed in and it's claustrophobic. And it's one of the reasons why that episode works. And why that episode has such a nice, it has a lot of tension and a lot of fear and a lot of atmosphere to it. And this does that as well. And the fact it does it completely with audio impresses me. The incidental music in this is so good and so good at building the mood of the story, building the fact that there's something wrong going on here, something's off kilter, something's not right. And the sound effects, not just the music, but the sound effects. There's a lot of different sound effects, of course, do a really good job of building on that. Everything seems executed masterfully here, and I was really impressed by that. And as the story was progressing, and the Doctor and Constance, is that his companion's name? I'm not familiar with her. And like some of the companions I don't know that well, but I've heard of them, like Bernice Summerfield and Charlie, but I'm not familiar with Constance. You know, they show up pretty early on and get involved with what's going on. The great thing is as I was listening to this story, I was instinctively forming theories about what was happening, hypothesis about what's going on. Okay, this has happened, so maybe this is going on. And it would be a valid theory with the information we had. I'm like, yes, I feel comfortable with this theory. Then something else would happen. And I would have to, okay, new information, need to redo my theory here, need to redo my theory. And that would be this. And then as I got more information, my theories kept changing. And it would be like, first I thought this. And I'm trying to avoid spoilers. I really want to talk about this before I get into spoilers. Usually I just kind of ramble. I really want to talk about stuff before I get into spoilers. Like I was confident about this. This made sense. This worked. And then I was confident about something similar, but maybe this. This works. This is good. And then found out this happened. And I'm like, yes, that makes sense. And so I love the fact that while I'm listening to the story, it's engaging me. It's drawing me in. Now, it's long. It's probably at least an hour long. So there was a couple times I took breaks. I got on the computer for a little bit. I chilled out. Got a bite to eat. So I did take a little breaks because with audios, I do kind of have to take breaks. But I felt engaged the whole time. Once I got over the initial confusion about what's happening, I really started engaging with this story. I love the fact there's a fog around, like you can barely see in front of you fog, and there's something just inherently creepy about a really thick fog. Just ask anyone who's ever seen The Fog, the good one, not the remake with Clark Kent, the good one. So you have a train, you have a fog, you have the fact that it's night and the sun still hasn't come up even when it should have, something the doctor points out. To get that there's something going on where they're at, or where they're at might not be where they're supposed to be. And then things happen and you're like, well, how is this happening? If this person's here, how are they here? And again, the voice acting is really good. I was really impressed by the cast of the story. The male voices especially I like because a lot of times in Big Finish, I'll get confused with who's who. And I'll be like, okay, which one's talking now? But especially with the male cast, because again, this doesn't have a very large cast, which is one of the things I like about it, much like how Midnight didn't have a very large cast. The male voices were very easy for me to tell apart. You got the doctor, you got Tim, and you got Norman, and then of course a couple other people who show up, Keith. They all have very distinctive voices, especially the guy doing Norman. He has a very distinctive voice, so you can always tell when Norman's talking. Some of the girls sounded a little similar, but the more I listened to it, the more I could start telling them apart. That, and they were referred to by name a lot, that helped. They did a really good job, so I always knew who was talking, so I was never getting confused like I do in some stories. I really enjoyed that. And so it did a really good job with the scary parts of the story, building tension, looking over your shoulder, while also building the mystery of what was happening and peeling it back layer by layer by layer. I really liked this story. I really engaged with it. So I'm going to say you definitely need to hear the end of the line. And that's what I'm going to say without getting into spoilers. And I'm really, honestly, if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. It's very seldom I split my normal section up from my spoiler section. I usually just talk. But I'm doing that for a reason, because you really should listen to it. Okay, so we're going to get into spoilers. Originally, when they find the train and it's beat up and it's destroyed and it seemed like it's been there for a while, I thought maybe they were in some kind of time, not necessarily a time loop, but they were in a situation where time wasn't moving right. Like maybe they got to the train and it was centuries old, where everything's dilapidated. And then they get back to the same train later and it doesn't look that old. So I thought there might have been timey-wimey stuff going on. Then you find out one character, Dave, let's say Dave, he died. The woman says, I saw him out there and he died. But then they hear him banging on the door and then he screams like something gets him. But then they open the bathroom door and he's dead in the bathroom. So we have 3 Daves that may have died under other circumstances. So again, I'm thinking time travel shenanigans, that timey-wimey stuff is happening. It's Doctor Who. Timey-wimey things can happen. But then we start realizing what's actually going on is the dimensions are bleeding over, and that there's several different dimensions all interacting. So these are 3 different Daves from 3 different dimensions. That's pretty cool, and that you have all of these different trains, and that the 2 trains that we're at were different trains just from different dimensions. So they were the same train, but different dimensional versions of the same train. And then finding out that all of these different dimensions were crossing into each other, that the barriers between them were breaking down, and learning that while some dimensions were sunny and nice, you know, kind of like ours, supposedly, other dimensions were really dark, evil, well, maybe not evil, but dark, not good dimensions, and that the not good dimensions were seeping into the good, relatively speaking, dimensions. And that was causing different things to happen, like people were freaking out, reacting in ways they wouldn't. You find out that one of the Daves actually got killed by one of the girls because she just kind of snapped and he died because she's being affected by the darkness going on around them, the fog. One girl just becomes really giddy. You know, once she realizes there's, 100 billion other Alices out there, she just kind of doesn't have a care in the world and goes kind of bonkers and runs off. And then we find out the guy who kind of knows the layout of the place. You actually learn earlier than I would have anticipated there's something up with him. And I kind of had a guess. Because even Colin, when he takes the murder woman out, I'll help her escape. And I know the layout because she's just trying to get away at this point. And then he basically convinces her when they're away from everybody. And even Colin says, oh, don't worry about Mr. Potter. There's more to him than meets the eye. And he convinces the woman to tell him what's going on, almost like he hypnotizes her. And I'm sitting there going, that seems a very master thing to do. And that's who, of course, it turns out to be, is the master. And it's interesting because naturally he doesn't sound like Anthony Ainley voice-wise, because Anthony Ainley has sadly passed. It does a good job for explaining that, though, because the master's not actually there. He's nearby in his TARDIS, and he's using this character as his avatar because it's dangerous for a Time Lord to be out in this. That's why he's lured the Doctor in there. Because the Doctor's not quite sure why he's there. He just kind of ends up there. He's there just at the beginning of the story. And he's using this other person kind of think of it as a remote avatar. And while the voice is different, and that's a good reason for it, he still, once he reveals himself to be the master, he talks very much in a very Anthony Ainley way. He has Anthony Ainley's vocal mannerisms, let us say. The way he talks, I very much believe this is Ainley's master speaking. And I like the fact that when we find out the Normans are actually, there's a bunch of Normans around. They're actually created by a race that used to travel through the different parallel dimensions all the time back in the day, but apparently they're not around anymore. And I've heard about them somewhere else before. I don't know where, but they popped up in Doctor Who lore somewhere else before. And when you find out there's different ones of them that have different functions, and I like the fact when he calls him the master, he's like, yes, the master, the definite article, or so he says. There's a nice little, play on that, of course, from the Fourth Doctor. I enjoyed that. I like little Easter eggs and fan service like that. And he does a really good job of, like I said, the guy does a really good job of capturing Anthony Ainley's vocal mannerisms, which I appreciated. I very much believed this was Anthony Ainley's master controlling a puppet, basically. And I liked that. And that he needs the Doctor to do the work he doesn't want to do because, well, it's probably going to be fatal. And so I enjoyed all of that. I like what's going on with the other cast. You have people staying on the train, people getting off the train. It's really hard to explain. I really like it, though. It builds this sense of tension. And then, of course, when the Valeyard shows up, because he's very familiar with this area, and he's there too, he pretty much just smacks the master away. He basically tells him, okay, you're going to leave, you're going to get out of here. And the master's like, how dare you? And the Valeyard's just like, pop! Doesn't actually slap him, but he basically just like, I said, listen, you need to get up out of here right now. You're in my domain now. That's cool. The Valeyard just sends him away with his tail between his legs, and the master leaves. He leaves. So it's nice to see the Valeyard show up. He doesn't really do a lot except be awesome and intimidating, and makes the master flee, and he's like, I have my own plans for the Doctor. It's pretty cool. I'm sure that's Michael Jason voicing him as well, and it's really good. It's really, really good. And so I'm trying to think of a couple of, because there are a couple other things I just can't think of. I really, really liked this story. Again, it just had this vibe to it, this tone to it, this feel to it that just really, really reached out and grabbed me. It had the horror and the atmosphere and the tension and the mood and the tone, just all of that fit, and the mystery of it, because it doesn't just say this is going on. It's like an onion, you know, layer after layer after layer after layer, until you finally get at the core of it. And when you finally think you know what's going on, something else happens, and it's so good. Really like the voice cast, really like the incidental music, really like the sound effects. Easily one of my favorites from Big Finish. Right now it's going to be between part 1 here and Jubilee. Those have been my top 2 so far. But yeah, I haven't been this blown away by a Big Finish story since Jubilee, which was my first Big Finish story. So I really, really like this one, and I really encourage you to give it a listen. I'm looking forward to listening to the other 3 stories soon. I was really blown away by this one. I want to give Unknown Don't Trust Numbers a huge shout out here. I really appreciate him sending this. Makes a great decorative piece too. Whoop, trying to follow. Oh, there we go. I really, really enjoy it. If there's anything you would like to send me, my P.O. box is down in the description below. I'd love to get some more Big Finish you think I might like. I really need to get into some 8th Doctor stuff. Chimes at Midnight. I hear good things about Chimes at Midnight? Chimes of Midnight? Something like that. I also have a it's been a long week. I also have a Patreon. If you like what I do, like to support what I do, that does help me pay the bills. A link to that's down in the description below. Unknown Don't Trust Numbers is one of my patrons. I want to give a shout out to 2 of my other patrons, Colin Coney and Stephen Crane. I appreciate their continued support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. I also have a link to my Amazon wishlist and my Amazon UK wishlist as well. And if you enjoy my channel and haven't subscribed yet, I'm so excited I can't talk. Go ahead and click that like button and that subscribe button. That helps me out, and I certainly appreciate it. I always enjoy growing the channel. And most importantly, go listen to The Last Adventure, especially part 1, The End of the Lie, because I loved it. And also, thank you for watching.